Being erased didn't scream. It clicked. The cold rejection of the biometric lock on the $30 million penthouse I wired. At 11 at night in the rain. My black card was useless plastic. My husband was 30,000 feet up, toasting his intern, thinking he had stripped me bare. Then my phone buzzed. A deep voice asked if I wanted him to pay for his new mistress's handbag with his own blood. My name is Hope Lamberton, and until 45 minutes ago, I was the invisible architect of the modern world. Now, I am a ghost standing on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, shivering in a Burberry trench coat that is rapidly soaking through to the silk lining. The rain in Manhattan does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. I stared up at the building I had purchased 5 years ago. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors, a glass fortress in the sky. My hand was still raised, pressing against the biometric scanner at the service entrance. The scanner was a sleek, black glass panel, a device I had personally customized to recognize the unique vascular pattern of my palm and the specific rhythm of my heartbeat. It was supposed to be the most secure lock in New York City. Access denied. Identity not recognized. The red LED pulse on the panel felt like a slap in the face. It was not a malfunction. I wrote the code for this system. I knew the difference between a bug and a command. This was a hard delete. My user profile had not just been suspended, it had been scrubbed from the root directory. I reached into my bag for my phone. My fingers were numb, not from the cold, but from a sudden, hollow shock that started in my stomach and radiated out to my extremities. I tapped the banking app icon. Face ID failed. I typed in my passcode. Incorrect. I tried my backup passcode. Incorrect. A notification banner slid down from the top of the screen. It was an email from a law firm I knew intimately. Sterling, Cooper, and Vance. Julian's Sharks. The subject line was clinical. Dissolution of marriage and cease and desist order. I huddled under the dripping awning of a closed luxury boutique, the light from the window display illuminating the diamonds I could no longer afford. I opened the email. It was a masterpiece of legal violence. It informed me that Julian Thorne was filing for separation based on irreconcilable differences. But that was the gentle part. The second paragraph stated that due to impending criminal investigations regarding the embezzlement of $3 million from the Aura Dynamics charity initiative, my assets had been frozen pending a forensic audit. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. Acidic and sharp. Embezzlement. I was the one who funded the charity with my own inheritance before Aura ever made a profit. I was the one who balanced the books every Friday night while Julian was out at networking dinners that miraculously lasted until 3 in the morning. Attached to the email was a non-disclosure agreement. It offered me a monthly stipend of $2,000, less than what we spent on dry cleaning, in exchange for my silence regarding the company's proprietary technology. If I refused to sign, or if I attempted to access company servers, the firm would press full charges for corporate espionage and grand larceny. My phone pinged again, a different sound this time. A social media notification. Julian Thorne just posted a photo. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew I should not look. It is the digital equivalent of picking a scab until it bleeds. But I clicked. The photo was high definition, filtered to perfection. It showed 2 hands clinking crystal flutes of champagne against the backdrop of a clouded night sky seen through an oval window. I recognized the cabin immediately. It was the private suite on the Emirates A380 to Paris. I saw the sleeve of Julian's bespoke Tom Ford suit, and next to it, a slender manicured hand adorned with a diamond bracelet I had designed for my mother's 60th birthday. The caption read, "New beginnings with the future of fashion. Paris bound. Power couple. New era Aura Dynamics." And there she was, tagged in the photo. Sienna Vane. I swiped to the next image in the carousel. It was a selfie. Julian was smiling that blinding, charismatic smile that had charmed investors out of billions. Sienna was leaning into him, her head on his shoulder, looking up at the camera with wide, innocent doe eyes. She looked fresh, young, and expensive. I looked at the timestamp, Posted 10 minutes ago. This was not a mistake. This was not a drunken impulse. As I stood there, watching the rain blur the lights of the passing traffic, the chaotic data points in my head began to align into a terrifyingly clear pattern. Julian did not just decide to leave me tonight. You do not lock a founder out of their own mainframe in an hour. You do not fabricate a paper trail for a $3 million embezzlement charge over a weekend. This was a scheduled execution. I closed my eyes and let the timeline reconstruct itself in my mind. 6 months ago, Julian had insisted we upgrade the server security, suggesting we bring in an external audit team for compliance. I had agreed. Too busy coding the patch for the neural network to supervise them, that was when they installed the back doors. 4 months ago, he asked me to sign over power of attorney for tax optimization purposes regarding the charity fund. I trusted him. 2 months ago, Sienna Vane was hired as an intern for the marketing department. Despite having no degree and a portfolio consisting entirely of TikTok trends, I had been coding the architecture of my own destruction, and I had handed Julian the compile key. A taxi splashed a wave of dirty water onto the sidewalk, jolting me back to the present. I checked my wallet. I had $46 in cash. My credit cards were dead. My Apple Pay was linked to the frozen accounts. I could not go to our house in the Hamptons. The smart locks there were on the same network. I could not go to my parents. They had passed away a decade ago. I could not go to my friends. I tried to call Ben, the chief technical officer. We had built the first Aura prototype in a garage in Seattle. He was like a brother to me. The phone rang once, then a sharp click. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time. Blocked. I tried Sarah, the head of HR, a woman I had comforted through her own divorce last year. The subscriber you are calling is unavailable. Blocked. Julian had been thorough. He had not just fired me, he had quarantined me. To the employees of Aura Dynamics, I was likely already being painted as the unstable, thieving wife who had betrayed their visionary leader. He controlled the narrative because he controlled the communication channels. I hailed a yellow cab. It took 10 minutes for one to stop. I looked like a drowned rat, not a billionaire's wife. Queens, I told the driver. Find me a motel that takes cash. Keep the meter under $30. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes scanning the expensive cut of my coat and the ruin of my hair. He did not ask questions. In New York, everyone knows the look of someone who has just fallen from a great height. We crossed the Queensboro Bridge, leaving the glittering skyline of Manhattan behind. The city looked beautiful from a distance, a jeweled circuit board of ambition and electricity. I used to look at those lights and see potential. Now, I only saw the energy required to sustain a lie. The cab dropped me off in front of a place called the Sleepy Traveler. The neon sign was missing the letter E, so it buzzed, "Sell Pie Traveler," in a rhythmic, seizure-inducing pink. The air here smelled of exhaust fumes and frying oil. I paid the driver and walked into the lobby. It was behind bulletproof glass. The night clerk was a teenager with headphones around his neck who barely looked up from his phone. "One night," I said, sliding two $20 bills through the slot under the glass. "That is all I have." He glanced at the money, then at me. He tossed a key on the counter. "Room 104. Checkout is at 11. No guests, no noise." Room 104 was a box with peeling wallpaper that smelled faintly of lemon bleach and deeply of despair. The carpet was sticky. I sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the sirens wailing in the distance. I took off my wet coat and laid it over the radiator. Underneath, I was wearing a simple black cashmere sweater and jeans. I felt phantom vibrations in my pocket, but my phone was silent. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever heard. For the last 10 years, my mind had been a constant stream of data, server loads, latency rates, stock prices, code optimizations. I lived in the noise of creation. Julian provided the face, the voice, the charm. I provided the brain. I was happy in the shadows. I hated the spotlight. I thought we were partners. I thought we were a single organism, the hardware and the software. I realize now that to Julian, I was never a partner. I was a utility. I was a battery he had drained until it was empty. And now he was discarding the husk. It was not the poverty that made my hands shake. I had grown up poor in the Rust Belt. I knew how to survive on ramen noodles and determination. I knew how to fix a heater with duct tape. I was not afraid of being poor. I was shaking because of the violation. I thought about the nights I sat up with Julian when the company was near bankruptcy, holding his hand while he cried from stress. I thought about the code I wrote that revolutionized data compression, the code I named Jules in the beta version because I loved him so much. I thought about how I stepped back when Forbes wanted to put me on the cover, telling them to feature him instead because he is the soul of the company. He had taken my love and weaponized it. He had taken my brilliance and patented it under his name. I lay back on the lumpy pillow and stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a map of a country that did not exist. Julian thought he had won. He was sipping Chateau Margaux at 30,000 feet, laughing with a girl whose father's money he desperately needed to keep the company afloat. He thought Hope Lamberton was deleted. He thought I was just a sad, middle-aged woman crying in a motel room in Queens. He forgot one critical variable in his equation. I did not just build the system. I am the system. Every line of code in Aura Dynamics has my syntax, my logic, my fingerprints embedded in the subroutines. He could change the passwords. He could swap the biometric locks. He could bribe the board members. But he could not understand the machine. He was a user. I was the architect. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. Instead, I began to visualize the network topology of the Aura mainframe. I traced the pathways in my mind, looking for the back doors I had left open years ago, not for malice, but for maintenance. The tiny, invisible gaps in the armor that only the Creator knows about. The tears finally stopped. My breathing slowed. The cold sensation in my chest began to heat up, compressing into a hard, dense core of resolve. Let him have his night in Paris. Let him have the champagne and the girl. Let him think the war is over. Tomorrow, the architect would start the demolition. I reached for my phone to turn it off, to save the last 12% of battery life. Just as my thumb brushed the power button, the screen lit up one last time. Unknown number. Country code. Switzerland. I stared at the glowing digits, plus 41. It was late, or early, depending on where you were. In Switzerland, the banks were opening. In Paris, the sun was rising over Julian's betrayal. In New York, it was the dead of night. I hesitated. Julian's lawyers? A reporter who had dug up my personal number? I swiped right. I did not speak. Mrs. Thorne, a voice said. It was not a question. It was a statement. The voice was deep, textured with age and the kind of authority that does not need to shout. It sounded like gravel grinding against steel. Or should I say, Ms. Lamberton? I sat up straighter, the mattress springs squeaking beneath me. Who is this? Someone who is watching your husband spend my money on a very expensive mistake, the voice replied. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who is this? I repeated, sharper this time. My name is Marcus Vane, the man said, and I believe we have a mutual interest in the concept of liquidation. Marcus Vane. The name landed in the silence of my motel room like a lead weight dropped into deep water. I knew the name, of course. Everyone in the tech world knew Marcus Vane. He was the shadow behind the throne of half the Fortune 500 companies. He was a man who did not invest in products. He invested in leverage. He was the proprietor of the Vane hedge fund, an entity so aggressive it was rumored to have destabilized the currency of a small South American nation just to correct a quarterly earnings report. And he was the father of the girl currently drinking my husband's champagne. I held the phone tighter, my knuckles white against the dark casing. I am listening, I said. My voice was raspy, stripped of the polish I usually reserved for board meetings. Good, Vane replied. Because time is a commodity you are currently hemorrhaging. A black sedan is parked 3 blocks east of your current location. The license plate ends in 55. You have 6 minutes to get inside before it leaves. I am not getting in a car with strangers. Mr. Vane, I may be destitute, but I am not stupid. A low sound came through the speaker, something that might have been a chuckle if it had any warmth in it. You think this is about my daughter sleeping with your husband, Ms. Lamberton? You think I am calling to offer you condolences or perhaps a settlement to save my family's reputation? You are looking at the micro. I need you to look at the macro. I am looking at a wall with peeling wallpaper, I snapped. My husband froze my assets. I am done playing games. Julian is not just freezing your assets, Vane cut in, his voice losing its mocking edge and turning razor sharp. He is liquidating the company, right now, while you sit in Queens feeling sorry for yourself. Julian is negotiating the sale of the Aura Core source code to a consortium based in St. Petersburg. The air left my lungs. That is impossible. The core is proprietary. It is the heart of the neural network. He cannot sell it without board approval, and he certainly cannot sell it to foreign entities without triggering an export control violation. It is classified as dual-use technology. He is not selling it officially, Vane said, his tone dry and factual. He is selling it through a back channel, and he is using my daughter's stupidity to move the money. Do you know about the Sienna Vane Fashion Initiative? The startup capital Julian gifted her? I saw the press release, I muttered. Seed money for a handbag line. It is a laundry machine, Vane said. Julian is moving the initial deposit through her shell company to clean it before it hits the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. He is using my daughter as a mule. She thinks she is a CEO. In reality, she is an accomplice to grand larceny and money laundering. My mind raced. The programmer in me latching onto the logic of the scheme. It was elegant in its cruelty. Use the girlfriend as the shield. If the feds investigated, the paper trail would lead to Sienna Vane, not Julian Thorne. Why tell me? I asked. Why not just stop him? You are Marcus Vane. You could crush him with a phone call. Because I do not just want to stop him, Vane said. I want to destroy him, and I cannot do that without the person who built the weapon he is trying to sell. Get in the car, hope, or stay in that motel, and wait for the FBI to come for you. Why would the FBI come for me? Because, Vane said, and this time his voice was deadly quiet. To authorize the transfer of the core code, Julian needed 2 signatures, his own, and the chief architect's. He forged your digital signature 40 minutes ago. When the sale goes through and the Department of Defense realizes their encryption protocols have been compromised by Russian intelligence, the warrant will not have Julian's name on it alone. It will have yours. You are not just looking at poverty, Ms. Lamberton. You are looking at 20 years in federal prison for treason. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. Treason. Julian had not just locked me out. He had framed me. He had set me up to be the fall guy for the biggest intellectual property theft of the decade. He knew I was the only one who understood the code. If it showed up in Russia, logic dictated I was the one who sent it. I did not pack. I had nothing to pack. I grabbed my wet trench coat, shoved my phone into my pocket, and walked out of room 104. I left the key on the counter. The teenage clerk did not look up. The rain had turned into a torrential downpour. I walked 3 blocks east, head down, fighting the wind. The street was deserted, save for the occasional garbage truck rumbling past. A black Mercedes Maybach was idling at the corner. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. The license plate ended in 55. I opened the back door and slid inside. The interior smelled of rich leather and ozone. The driver, a man with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, did not turn around. He simply locked the doors and merged into the traffic. We drove in silence. I watched the city blur past, my mind working furiously. I was dissecting the timeline Vane had given me. 40 minutes ago. That meant the transaction was in the handshake phase. The data transfer had not happened yet. You cannot move terabytes of neural data over a hotel Wi-Fi. Julian needed a hard line, or a physical handoff. That was why he was in Paris. The summit. The car did not head toward Manhattan. It turned west, toward the Lincoln Tunnel, and then deep into the industrial wastelands of New Jersey. We drove for 40 minutes until we reached a private airfield near Teterboro. The car bypassed the main terminal and drove straight onto the tarmac, stopping in front of a massive corrugated metal hangar. The driver opened my door. Inside, I stepped out. The hangar door was open a crack, spilling harsh white light onto the wet concrete. I walked through the gap. The space was cavernous. In the center sat a Gulfstream G650, its engine silent but gleaming, and sitting at a folding metal table near the landing gear. Under the glare of a halogen work light was Marcus Vane. He looked exactly like his photos in the Financial Times, only sharper. He was a man carved from granite, with silver hair swept back from a forehead etched with lines of perpetual calculation. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my parents' house, but he wore it casually, unbuttoned, with no tie. He did not stand up when I approached. He was typing on a laptop, a glass of dark amber liquid sitting near his hand. "You are 4 minutes late," he said, not looking up from the screen. "Traffic," I said, stopping at the other side of the table. And I had to decide if I was walking into a trap. Vane stopped typing. He closed the laptop slowly and looked at me. His eyes were the color of steel wool. They swept over me, taking in the wet hair, the ruined coat, the exhausted stance, but there was no pity in them. There was only assessment. "If I wanted to trap you, Hope, I would have let the FBI find you in Queens tomorrow morning," he said. He gestured to the empty metal chair opposite him. "Sit." I remained standing. "I prefer to stand. It keeps me alert. You said Julian forged my signature. Prove it." Vane raised an eyebrow. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He tapped a key on his laptop and spun it around to face me. On the screen was a stream of server logs. I recognized the syntax immediately. It was the access log for the Aura Secure repository. User, H_Lamberton. Authenticated via RSA 4096 key. Action. Decryption protocol initiated. Timestamp. 2300 hours. Eastern Standard Time. I leaned in, scanning the lines of code. My heart hammered against my ribs. It looked perfect. To an outsider, it looked exactly like I had logged in and unlocked the vault. "He stole my physical security key," I whispered. "He must have taken it from my safe while I was sleeping." "He did not just take the key," Vane said, taking a sip of his drink. "He used a deepfake voice synthesizer to bypass the vocal recognition confirmation. He has been recording your calls for months, training the AI to mimic your inflection. He essentially created a digital clone of you to authorize the crime." I felt a wave of nausea. It was a violation deeper than any physical affair. Julian had stolen my voice. He had stolen my identity to sell my life's work. "The buyer," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Who is it, specifically?" "Oleg Volkov," Vane said. "A former KGB technical officer turned oligarch. He runs an outfit called the Black Math Group. They specialize in reverse engineering Western tech for military applications. If Volkov gets the Aura core, he will strip it for parts and use it to build targeting systems for drones. Your beautiful neural network, designed to optimize city energy grids, will be used to guide missiles." I gripped the edge of the table. "Julian does not know that. He is arrogant, but he is not a warmonger. He thinks he is selling it to a search engine competitor." "Julian does not care," Vane corrected me. "Julian sees a $500 million wire transfer. He does not care if the money comes from a search engine or a warlord. He is a salesman. Hope, he sells the dream. You are the one who worries about the reality." Vane stood up. He was tall, well over 6 feet. He walked around the table and stood in front of me. Up close, I could smell the faint scent of cigar smoke and expensive cologne. "My daughter," he said, the word tasting sour in his mouth, "is a fool. Sienna thinks she has won the prize. She thinks she has captured the great Julian Thorne. She has no idea she is standing on a trapdoor with a noose around her neck. When Julian gets his money, he will disappear. He will leave Sienna holding the bag for the money laundering. She will go to prison alongside you. He looked at me with a strange intensity. I am a ruthless man. Ms. Lamberton, I have destroyed companies, bankrupt families, and erased rivals, but I do not let my blood go to rot in a cell because of a grifter like your husband. So you need me to save her, I said. I need you to save the legacy, he corrected. I need you to stop the sale. I have the financial clout, but I do not have the technical access. Julian has locked the system down. Even my best hackers cannot get in without triggering a total data wipe. They tell me the architecture is exquisite, unbreakable. I wrote it to be unbreakable, I said automatically. Exactly, Vane said. Only the builder knows where the loose brick is. He held out a hand. I am offering you a partnership. Not a job, a partnership. You help me stop Julian and clear my daughter's name, and I will put the entire weight of the Vane empire behind you. We will not just clear your name. We will take back your company. We will take back your house. We will take back every single thing he stole. And we will leave him with nothing but the suit on his back and a prison sentence. I looked at his hand. It was a hand that had signed death warrants for corporations. I do not want a master, Marcus, I said quietly. I spent 10 years building a throne for a man who treated me like a footstool. I am not trading one owner for another. Vane's lips curved into a smile. It was the first genuine expression I had seen on his face. It was a smile of predator recognizing another predator. I am not looking for a servant. Hope, if I wanted a servant, I would have hired another lawyer. I am looking for the person who wrote the Oracle. I am looking for the genius who hides in the dark, while the mediocrities take the credit. I am looking for the woman who is currently standing in a freezing hangar in New Jersey, plotting how to dissect her husband. He lowered his hand, but his gaze remained locked on mine. My daughter is beautiful, he said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone. She is charming. She knows how to wear a dress and how to smile for a camera, but if you cut her open, you find nothing but cotton candy and daddy's credit cards. She is soft. He took a step closer. But you are not soft. I watched the security footage of you outside your building tonight. You did not scream. You did not collapse. You calculated. That is why I am betting on you. He gestured to the plane behind him. The flight plan is filed for Paris, Le Bourget Airport. We leave in 20 minutes. On board. I have a team of forensic accountants and a satellite uplink to the global banking system. But the seat next to me is empty. I looked past him at the sleek metal bird. Paris, the city of light, the place where Julian was currently sleeping in high thread count sheets. Dreaming of his millions, I thought about the code, my art. He was going to sell it to butchers to turn into weapons. The fear that had gripped me in the motel room evaporated. In its place, a cold, crystalline anger solidified. It was clean. It was efficient. It was fuel. I do not need 20 minutes, I said. I walked past Marcus Vane, moving toward the stairs of the jet. I paused on the bottom step and looked back at him. And one more thing. Marcus, I said. If we do this, we do it my way. Julian expects a legal fight. He expects a crying wife. He does not expect a system failure. Marcus Vane picked up his glass and raised it in a silent toast. After you, architect. I climbed the stairs. The interior of the jet was warmer than the hangar. I sat in the leather seat that faced the front. I pulled out my phone and looked at the screen one last time. I deleted the photo of Julian and Sienna. I was not Hope Lamberton, the wife, anymore. I was the root admin, and I was going to revoke access. Wheels up, Vane commanded as he strapped himself in across from me. As the engines whined to life, screaming with enough thrust to push us across the Atlantic. I opened the laptop Vane had pushed across the table toward me. It was a blank slate. A terminal window blinked a steady, green cursor. I cracked my knuckles. "Let us see how Julian likes it," I whispered to the screen. "When the house he stole starts to lock the doors from the inside. The hum of the Gulfstream engines at 40,000 feet is a specific frequency, a low, expensive drone that usually puts billionaires to sleep. But to me, it sounded like the ventilation fans in the server room of the public library in Gary, Indiana. That was where I really grew up. I was not born into silk sheets and trust funds like Sienna Vane. I was born in the Rust Belt, in a town that America had chewed up and spat out. My father died in a steel mill accident when I was 4. My mother worked double shifts at a diner until her heart gave out when I was 12. I became a ward of the state, a ghost in a system that did not care if I lived or died. The library was my sanctuary. It was warm in the winter, and it had computers. They were ancient machines, beige boxes with monitors that hummed and flickered, donated by a local insurance company that had upgraded to Windows 95. But they were mine. I taught myself to code because I wanted to control something. In my real life, I had no power. I was the skinny girl in the foster home wearing hand-me-down clothes that smelled like other people's detergent. But inside the machine, I was a god. I could build worlds. I could command logic. If I typed a line correctly, the computer obeyed. It never lied. It never left. It never promised to come back and then forgot. By the time I was 18, I was doing freelance security testing for banks that had no idea they were paying a teenager living in a halfway house. I had enough money to get to New York, to get a scholarship, to disappear into the city of millions. And then I met Julian. It was 10 years ago at a tech mixer in a loft in Soho. He was wearing a suit that fit him too perfectly, holding a glass of wine he did not drink, trying to sell a concept to a group of venture capitalists. He was dazzling. He was charismatic. He was also completely wrong. I stood near the snack table, watching him flail. He was pitching a data compression algorithm that was mathematically impossible. The investors were starting to look bored. They were sharks, and they smelled blood. I should have stayed quiet. I was the girl in the oversized hoodie, the invisible coder, but I could not stand to see the logic fail. I walked over, took the marker from his hand, and corrected the equation on the whiteboard. "You are missing the variable for latency," I had said, not looking at him, just looking at the math. "If you route the packets through a decentralized node, you reduce the load by 40%. Silence filled the room. Then, the lead investor nodded. "That," he said, pointing at my scribbles. "We will fund that." Julian looked at me. He did not look angry. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and hunger that I mistook for love. Later that night, over cheap pizza, he told me we were two halves of a whole. "I am the face, hope," he said, his eyes shining. "You are the brain. I can sell ice to an Eskimo, but you can build the glacier. Let me protect you. Let me handle the lights and the noise. You just do what you love. You just create." I believed him. I hated the spotlight. I hated the pressure of public speaking. So we made a deal. I built Aura Dynamics from the ground up. I wrote every line of code for the Aura core. I designed the architecture that now ran smart cities and global banking systems. And Julian stood on the stages. He took the magazine covers. He took the applause. I was happy in the shadows. I thought I was safe there. But gratitude has a half-life. Over the years, I watched Julian change. At first, he would come home excited, telling me how we wowed the board. Then, it became how he saved the quarter. Eventually, the gratitude turned into resentment. He hated that he did not understand the product he sold. He hated that every time a technical question came up, he had to look at me for the answer. He did not want a partner anymore. He wanted to erase the evidence that he was a fraud. And the only evidence was me. "We are approaching international airspace," Marcus Vane said, interrupting my memories. He was watching me from across the aisle. "If you are going to do it now. Once we hit the satellite dead zone over the Atlantic, the latency will be too high." I nodded and cracked my neck. I pulled the laptop closer. I needed the source log. It was a digital ledger I had created 10 years ago, the very first block of code that proved I was the originator of the Aura core. It was not on the cloud. It was stored on a localized, air-gapped server inside our penthouse in Manhattan, the same apartment Julian had locked me out of. He thought changing the biometric locks kept me out. He thought physically barring the door was enough. He forgot that I wired the house. I opened the terminal on Vane's laptop. My fingers flew across the keys. I did not try to hack the front door. That would trigger an alarm. Instead, I went for the refrigerator. 3 years ago, Julian had insisted on a smart kitchen. The refrigerator was connected to the home network to monitor grocery levels. It was a stupid, insecure vulnerability that I had warned him about. He had laughed and said he wanted his ice maker to know when it was empty. Now, that ice maker was my Trojan horse, connecting to node. Kitchen_unit_alpha. Bypass protocol initiated. The screen flashed green. I was in. I routed my connection through the refrigerator, jumped to the thermostat in the hallway, and then bridged the gap to the private server in the study. It was like walking through my own home in the dark. I could almost see the digital layout of the rooms, the living room where we watched movies, the bedroom where I thought we were happy. I reached the server. The firewall was new. It was aggressive. Julian had hired a new security team, likely former military cyber ops. They had wrapped my server in layers of encryption. "I see you," I whispered. I did not attack the wall. I slipped under it. I used a legacy maintenance port I had coded for myself in case of emergency. A digital skeleton key disguised as a printer driver. Access granted. There it was. The Genesis file. The proof that Aura was mine. The metadata contained my digital signature from 10 years ago, embedded in the architecture in a way that could not be forged or removed without destroying the code itself. I initiated the download. The progress bar appeared. Downloading 10%. Suddenly, the screen flashed red. Alert. Unauthorized access detected. Tracing IP. My heart slammed against my ribs. They were awake. Julian's new team was monitoring the traffic. They had seen the data spike. "They found me," I said, my voice tight. "Cut the connection," Vane said, leaning forward. "No," I snapped. "I need this file. If I disconnect now, the data is corrupted, and I have nothing." 30%. A new window popped up on my screen. It was a chat box from the system administrator. "Admin. We see you. Nice try. Terminate the connection or we deploy the countermeasures." "They are trying to scare me," I said, typing a command to reroute my signal through a server farm in Mumbai to confuse the trace. 50%. The laptop began to heat up. They were not just tracing me. They were counterattacking. They were flooding my connection with junk data. A denial of service attack to choke the bandwidth. The download speed dropped. 55%. "Hope," Vane warned. "They are pinging the plane's satellite uplink. If they identify the tail number, Julian will know you are with me." "Let him know," I gritted out. "I am not running anymore." I saw the code shifting on the screen. The enemy admin was good. He was closing the maintenance port. He was bricking the server. He was going to wipe the drive before I could finish. I had to make a choice. I could not save everything. I had to strip the file down to its rawest form, discarding the interface, the graphics, the logs, keeping only the kernel. A single folder sat there, Genesis_core, RAR. I slumped back in the leather seat, gasping for air as if I had just run a mile. My hands were shaking. "Did you get it?" Vane asked. "I got it," I said, pointing to the file. "I have the proof, and I just melted the server in the penthouse. They cannot trace it back here. They will think it was a power surge." Suddenly, my phone buzzed. Not the one I used for calls. The burner phone I kept for system alerts. I picked it up. A notification from the Aura internal network. System-wide alert. Priority 1. Fugitive identified. Hope Lamberton is to be considered a hostile threat to corporate security. All employee access revoked. Bounty issued for digital capture. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "What is it?" Vane asked. Julian, I said, showing him the screen. He just put a bounty on my head. He knows I took the data. He has officially declared war. I looked out the window. The clouds were thick below us, masking the ocean. I was flying into the dark, toward a husband who wanted to destroy me, with a billionaire who wanted to use me, but for the first time in 10 years. I did not feel small. I did not feel like the orphan from the Rust Belt or the wife in the shadow. I touched the laptop lid. I had the truth in my hands. He thinks he is hunting a rabbit, I said softly. He does not realize he just let a wolf into the fold. Get some rest, Vane said, opening his own laptop again. We land in Paris in 4 hours. You will need your strength. The virtual war is over. The physical one is about to begin. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I replayed the code in my head, searching for the next vulnerability. Julian had taken my past. He had tried to take my future, but he had forgotten that I owned the present, and in the present, I was coming for him. The handshake was not physical. It was a transfer of data packets across a secured table at 45,000 feet. I looked at Marcus Vane. The adrenaline from the server hack was fading, replaced by a clarity that felt like ice water in my veins. The Genesis file, my proof of ownership, was safely encrypted on the hard drive sitting between us. But proof was passive. I needed an active weapon. I do not want your money, Marcus, I said, breaking the hum of the cabin silence. I know you are used to buying people. You think you can put me on a retainer, use my code to crush Julian, and then pat me on the head with a consulting fee. That is not happening. Marcus swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He watched me with the gaze of a man evaluating a racehorse. Then what is the price of your cooperation, Ms. Lamberton? Access, I said. I want full administrative privileges to your intelligence network. I want your lawyers to answer to me, not you, regarding this case. And when we burn Aura Dynamics to the ground, I want the rights to the ashes. Marcus smiled. It was a terrifying expression because it was genuine. Agreed. My legal team is already on the line. Put on the headset. I pulled on the noise-canceling headphones. The voice of a woman filled my ears. She introduced herself as Reynolds, head of Vane's forensic accounting unit in Zurich. Her tone was dry, sharp, and utterly professional. Mrs. Thorne, Reynolds said, we have been tracking the liquidity movements of Aura Dynamics for the last 3 hours. We found the bleed. Show me, I commanded. A monitor rose from the table surface. It displayed a complex web of transactions. I saw the familiar accounts of Aura, but they were hemorrhaging cash into shell companies with names like Blue Horizon and Vector Sigma. He is draining the operating capital, I noted, pointing at the screen. That is payroll. That is R&D budget. He is gutting the company to make himself liquid. Correct, Reynolds replied. But here is the interesting part. The money is not staying in the shells. It is pooling in a singular escrow account held by a bank in Geneva. The account is flagged for a high-value transaction pending physical authentication. The sale, I said. He is selling the core. We intercepted a secure comms burst from the Ritz Paris. Reynolds continued. Julian Thorne is scheduled to attend a private gala tomorrow night at the Palais Garnier. Officially, it is a charity auction for European arts. Unofficially, it is a summit for the gray market, a meeting place for tech oligarchs, arms dealers, and buyers who operate outside international regulations. Oleg Volkov is on the guest list. I sat back. He is going to do it at the gala. He is going to hand over the encryption key to Volkov in the middle of a room full of people. We can have the French authorities pick him up at the airport, Marcus suggested. We have enough evidence for a detainment. No, I said instantly. If you arrest him now, he denies everything. He claims the transfers were errors. He claims the meeting with Volkov was coincidental. He has the best lawyers in the world, paid for with my money. He will walk away with a slap on the wrist, and I will be tied up in litigation for 10 years. I looked at the code scrolling on my screen. We let him sell it, Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to give a Russian arms dealer the most advanced neural network in the world? I want Julian to think he is selling it, I corrected. I am going to rewrite the kernel. I pulled the keyboard closer. In software, there is a concept called a poison pill. It is a defense tactic. You let the hostile entity ingest the system. It looks fine. It tastes fine. The code compiles. The demo runs perfectly, but buried deep in the syntax, there is a dormant command, a logic bomb. I began to type. I am going to create a mirror version of the Aura core, to Julian, and even to Volkov's engineers. It will look identical to the master file. The architecture, the efficiency, the response times, it will all be there. But I am adding a dependency. What dependency? Marcus asked. Me, I said. The system will require a heartbeat check every 24 hours from a specific digital signature, mine, if it does not receive that handshake. The code does not just stop working, it inverts. I looked up at Marcus. It will not just shut down, it will eat its own data. It will erase the servers it is installed on, and before it dies, it will broadcast its location and the identity of the user to every cybersecurity agency from the NSA to Interpol. Marcus stared at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like respect in his eyes. You are not just setting a trap, you are building a guillotine. He wants to sell my soul, I said cold. I am going to make sure it haunts him. For the next 6 hours, I did not speak, I did not eat. I existed only in the flow state. I wrote code with a ferocity I had never known. Usually, I coded to build, to fix, to optimize. This was different. I was coding to destroy. I wove the poison pill into the deepest layers of the Aura framework, hiding it under innocent-looking driver updates and font packages. By the time I compiled the final build, my eyes were burning, but the file was ready. Reynolds, I said into the headset, I am uploading the payload. Can you swap it with the file on Julian's cloud server? We have a backdoor into the hotel Wi-Fi, Reynolds confirmed. We can execute a man-in-the-middle attack. When Julian downloads the file to the drive he intends to give Volkov, he will be downloading your version. Do it. I took off the headset and rubbed my temples. The plane was beginning its descent. Outside, the sky was turning a bruising purple of pre-dawn. Marcus stood up and walked to the small bar at the front of the cabin. He poured 2 espressos. He brought one to me. You have a terrifying mind. Hope, he said. I learned from the best, I replied, taking the cup. Or the worst. He sat down across from me again. Tell me something. You built this company. You built his reputation. Why did you stay in the dark for so long? Why let a peacock like Julian strut around wearing your feathers? I looked at the black reflection in the window. I thought we were a family, Marcus scoffed. It was a harsh, dismissive sound. Family, a sentimental word for a biological obligation. Is that what Sienna is to you? I asked. An obligation? Marcus looked at me over the rim of his cup. His face was a mask of granite. Sienna is a bad investment. I poured resources into her education, her social standing, her careers. The return on investment has been negative for 2 decades. She is weak. She seeks approval from men who are beneath her because she is afraid to stand alone, like she is doing with your husband. She is your daughter, I said. She is my blood, Marcus corrected. But legacy? Legacy is not DNA. Legacy is competence. Legacy is what you build that survives you. He gestured to the laptop where my code sat. That code is your child. Hope, that is your blood. Julian kidnapped it. He is selling it on a street corner. That is the violation, not the infidelity. Sex is cheap. Genius is rare. I looked at him. He was a monster, in his own way. He saw human beings as assets and liabilities. But in this moment, his cold logic aligned perfectly with my rage. He was right. Julian hadn't just cheated on a wife. He had trafficked a child, my digital child. You are a cold bastard. Marcus, I said. And you are a woman who is about to become a legend, he replied. But you cannot walk into Paris looking like a victim. He pressed a button on the intercom. Prepare the forward cabin. Ms. Lamberton needs a wardrobe. I stood up and walked to the bathroom at the rear of the plane. I locked the door and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked tired. Her hair was long, pulled back in a messy bun, the way Julian liked it because he said it made me look soft and domestic. She wore a trench coat that smelled of rain and poverty. She looked like Hope Lamberton, the supportive wife, the invisible architect. I opened the amenity drawer. There was a pair of silver grooming scissors. I picked them up. The metal was cool against my skin. I did not hesitate. I grabbed a handful of the long chestnut hair that Julian used to stroke while he lied to me. Snip, the hair fell into the porcelain sink. Snip, I cut away the softness. I cut away the domesticity. I cut away the fear. When I was done, my hair was a sharp, jagged bob that framed my jawline like a helmet. I looked severe. I looked dangerous. I washed my face with cold water. I did not put on makeup to hide the circles under my eyes. I wanted them to see the exhaustion. I wanted them to see the cost of the war. I walked out of the bathroom. In the forward cabin, a stylist Marcus had summoned, God knows how, had laid out a selection of clothes. There were no floral dresses, no soft cardigans. There were suits, sharp, tailored, architectural suits in black, charcoal, and midnight blue. I chose a black Alexander McQueen suit with a structured blazer that looked like armor plating. I put on a pair of stiletto heels that were not made for walking. They were made for piercing. When I stepped back into the main cabin, the plane was banking for final approach into Le Bourget. Paris spread out below us, a grid of lights that I could probably hack in 10 minutes. Marcus looked up from his papers. He paused. He did not smile, but he nodded, a slow, respectful nod. The wife is gone, he noted. She stayed in Queens, I said. I buttoned the blazer. It felt tight, holding me together. This is the CEO. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical thud. We were minutes away from the ground. Minutes away from the city where my husband was sleeping with his mistress, thinking he had won the game. The car is waiting, Marcus said. We have a safe house in the 16th arrondissement. We go dark until the gala. No, I said. I checked my phone. The upload was complete. The poison pill was in place. We do not go dark. We go bright. I want him to know the atmosphere has changed. I want him to feel the pressure drop before the storm hits. I looked at Marcus. Get me a ticket to the gala. Not as your guest, as your partner. Done, Marcus said as the wheels touched the runway. The reverse thrusters roared, slowing us down. I looked out at the gray morning of Paris. Welcome to Paris. Hope, I whispered to my reflection in the window. Let us go break some hearts. Paris is often called the City of Light, but for people like Julian Thorne, it is the City of Glare. It is a place where if you polish a piece of brass hard enough, you can convince the world it is solid gold. Marcus Vane's safe house was a limestone townhouse in the 16th arrondissement, hidden behind high iron gates and a wall of ivy that had likely been growing since the French Revolution. It was the kind of wealth that whispered. Inside, the floors were original parquet, and the silence was absolute. There were no gilded mirrors, no crystal chandeliers screaming for attention. It smelled of beeswax and old money. Contrast this with where my husband was staying. I sat in the library of the townhouse, a room lined with books that had actually been read. On the mahogany desk in front of me, 3 monitors were glowing. The center screen showed a live feed from the Imperial Suite at the Ritz Paris. Getting into the Ritz's network had been embarrassingly easy. For a hotel that charged €5,000 a night, their cybersecurity was primitive. They prioritized guest convenience over network integrity. All I had to do was spoof the MAC address of the room's iPad, the one used to order room service and control the curtains, and I had a window into their lives. I watched Julian pace across the Aubusson carpet. He was wearing a white bathrobe that looked fluffy enough to suffocate in. He held a glass of cognac in one hand and a lit cigar in the other, ash dropping carelessly onto the antique floor. He looked like a caricature of a tycoon, a man playing dress-up in his father's closet. Sienna was on the balcony, posing. She had forced Julian to take 300 photos of her in the last hour. Now, she was reviewing them, her face illuminated by the harsh blue light of her phone. "Babe," she whined, her voice tinny through the microphone I had hijacked on the smart TV. "The lighting is weird. My ring doesn't pop. Can we order more champagne? The bottle looks good in the background." "Order the cellar," Julian muttered, not looking at her. He was staring at his own reflection in the mirror, practicing his smile. "We are celebrating, remember? The deal is 90% done." I shifted my gaze to the left monitor. It displayed Sienna's Instagram feed. She had posted a story 5 minutes ago. The caption read, "Parisian dreams with my king. Aura life billionaire mindset." The photo showed her hand, weighed down by a yellow diamond the size of a quail egg, resting on a Louis XIV desk. In the background, slightly out of focus, but legible if you knew what to look for, was a stack of documents. I zoomed in. I applied a sharpening filter. There, sitting under a half-eaten croissant, was the cover page of the technical dossier for the Aura Core, and right next to it, written on a hotel notepad, was a series of numbers. "He left the frequency codes for the satellite uplink on the desk," I said aloud to the empty room. "He is broadcasting the encryption keys to anyone with an internet connection and a zoom lens." I felt a wave of professional nausea. I had spent 5 years designing the security protocols for those keys. I had built air-gapped servers to protect them, and Julian was using them as a coaster for his breakfast pastry while his mistress broadcast them to 2 million followers. Marcus walked into the library. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket, looking like a weary emperor. He placed a cup of black coffee next to my keyboard. "What are the lovebirds doing?" he asked. "Committing inadvertent corporate espionage," I replied, pointing at the screen. "Your daughter just leaked a level 4 security protocol on Instagram." Marcus looked at the screen. He did not get angry, he just sighed, a sound of deep, exhausted resignation. "She thinks she is building a brand. She does not realize she is building evidence." On the main screen, the doorbell of the suite rang. Julian tightened his robe and opened the door. 2 men walked in. They were not hotel staff. They wore ill-fitting leather jackets and carried heavy briefcases. I recognized one of them. Viktor Sokolov, a mid-level fixer for the Russian syndicate, known for facilitating transactions that could not be processed through SWIFT. "Mr. Thorne," Sokolov said. His English was heavy and wet. "We have the preliminary agreements." "Excellent," Julian said, dropping into a velvet armchair and crossing his legs. He gestured vaguely at Sienna, who was still on the balcony. "Ignore the girl. She is just decoration." Sienna did not hear him. She was too busy perfecting her pout for a selfie. "We have concerns about the ownership," Sokolov said, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "The rumors regarding your wife, the architect." Julian laughed. It was a loud, performative sound. He took a swig of cognac. "Hope, please, do not make me laugh. Hope Lamberton is a glorified typist. I let her think she was running things because it kept her busy. She is a country burden. Gentlemen, a Rust Belt anchor I have been dragging around for 10 years. She knows how to follow instructions, not how to lead." I stopped typing. The cursor blinked on my screen. Glorified typist, country burden. I looked at the man I had married. I looked at the man whose hand I had held through panic attacks before board meetings. The man I had coached on every technical answer he had ever given in an interview. "She has no vision," Julian continued, warming to his audience. "She wanted to use Aura for charity, for optimizing power grids in third-world countries. Can you imagine? I had to cut her loose to let the company fly. She is probably sitting in a shelter somewhere right now, crying over her knitting." The silence in the library was absolute. I felt the temperature in my chest drop to absolute 0. "He really believes that," Marcus observed quietly. "He has told the lie so many times he has overwritten his own memory. He thinks I am a typist," I whispered. My voice was steady, but my fingers were trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from the buildup of kinetic energy. Okay, let us see how he likes my typing. I minimized the video feed. I opened a terminal window connected to the global banking interchange. What are you doing? Marcus asked. He wants to live the high life, I said. He wants to be the big man in Paris, but he forgets that his credit cards are linked to the corporate expense account, and the corporate expense account is managed by an automated algorithm. I navigated to the admin panel for the Aura Dynamics Executive Finance Protocols. I am adjusting the fraud detection sensitivity, I explained, my fingers flying. Usually, it is set to trigger if someone buys a yacht in North Korea. I am setting it to trigger if someone buys a stick of gum in Paris. I hit enter. Phase 1 initiated, I said. Let us go shopping. On the screen, Julian was shaking hands with Sokolov. Let us celebrate properly, Julian announced. Sienna, get your coat. We are going to Avenue Montaigne. I promised you that crocodile Birkin. Sienna squealed, dropping her phone on the bed and running to hug him. Oh my God, you are the best daddy ever. I watched them leave the room. Do we follow them? Marcus asked. We do not need to, I said. I can track them by their transaction attempts. I pulled up a map of Paris on the right monitor. A blue dot representing Julian's phone was moving towards the luxury district. 20 minutes later, the dot stopped at 42 Avenue George V, the flagship Hermès store. I opened the real-time transaction log for Julian's Black Amex. Attempt, Hermès Paris. Amount, 45,000 euros. Status, processing. I leaned forward. Wait for it. Status, denied. Code, 05, do not honor. I could almost see the scene. The sales associate, polite but firm, handing the card back. The confused look on Julian's face. The nervous giggle from Sienna. Attempt, Hermès Paris. Amount, 45,000 euros. Card, Visa Infinite. Status, processing status, denied. Code, 51, insufficient funds. He is trying the backup card, I narrated. He thinks it is a bank error. He is probably shouting at the manager right now. Do you know who I am? Attempt, Hermès Paris. Amount, 10,000 euros. Card, MasterCard, World Elite. Status, denied. Code, 41, lost/stolen. I flagged that one as stolen 3 minutes ago, I added. The blue dot on the map stayed at the store for another 10 minutes. I could imagine the humiliation, the line of tourists behind them watching, the security guard stepping a little closer, the whisper among the staff. Finally, the dot moved. It moved quickly, aggressively. He is leaving, Marcus said. He is angry. He is going to Cartier, I said, watching the dot turn the corner. He thinks it is just the Hermès terminal. The dot stopped at Cartier. Attempt, Cartier Paris. Amount, 62,000 euros. Item, Panthère necklace. Status, denied. Code, suspected fraud activity. Denied, I said softly. The dot moved again. Louis Vuitton. Denied. Chanel. Denied. They were running a gauntlet of rejection. Every time Julian tried to prove his power, the system simply said, no. It was not a scream. It was a silent, bureaucratic refusal. It was the system treating the CEO of Aura Dynamics like a broke tourist trying to buy a postcard with an expired debit card. My phone rang. It was the concierge at the Ritz. Mrs. Thorne? The voice was hesitant. We have a situation. Your husband is in the lobby. He is shouting at the front desk manager. His card was declined for the limousine service. I am aware, I said, putting on my most concerned, long-suffering wife voice. I am so sorry. Henri, is he making a scene? He is very agitated. Madame, he is threatening to buy the hotel and fire everyone. It is quite embarrassed for the other guests. Please tell him to calm down, I said. Tell him it must be a glitch with the international servers. Tell him Tell him to try paying in cash. I hung up. He does not have cash, Marcus noted. He never carries cash. He says it ruins the line of his suit. Exactly, I said. I looked back at the camera feed in the hotel suite. They were back. Julian stormed into the room, kicking the door shut. He threw his wallet across the room. It hit the mirror, cracking the glass. "It is a conspiracy," he screamed, his face a mottled red. "The banks are incompetent. I have $50 million in assets. How dare they decline me for a handbag?" Sienna was crying. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking small and defeated. "But Julian, the sales lady looked at me like I was a prostitute. She took the bag back. She put it behind the counter." "Shut up," Julian roared. He poured a drink, his hands shaking. "It is just a glitch. I will fix it. I will call the bank. I will have someone's head for this." He grabbed his phone and dialed. On my screen, a notification popped up. "Incoming call. Julian Thorne to priority banking line." I pressed a key. "Reroute call." "Where is it going?" Marcus asked. "To a voicemail box I set up," I said. "It plays a loop of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. The hold time is infinite." Julian paced the room, the phone pressed to his ear, listening to the violins. He looked trapped. The luxury suite that was supposed to be his palace had become his cage. He could order room service, but he couldn't pay for it. He could look at the view, but he couldn't go out into it. "He looks small," Marcus said. "He is small," I replied. "He just had a very big shadow." I watched Julian finish his drink and throw the glass against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 diamonds of crystal. "This is just the appetizer," I said, closing the banking terminal. "He thinks he's having a bad day. He does not know that tomorrow, at the gala, he is going to have a bad life." I stood up and walked to the window of the townhouse. Outside, Paris was beginning to sparkle as the streetlights came on. It was beautiful. It was indifferent. "Tomorrow night," I said to the city. I take back my name. I turned to Marcus. "Is the dress ready?" "It is upstairs," he said. "It is dramatic." "Good," I said. "I am done being subtle. Tomorrow, I want to be visible from space." I looked back at the screen one last time. Julian was sitting on the floor amidst the broken glass. Head in his hands, Sienna was in the bathroom, probably taking a selfie in the mirror with a caption about haters. I felt no pity. I felt only the cold satisfaction of a balanced equation. "Sleep well, Julian," I whispered. "You will need the rest." The Palais Garnier is not just an opera house. It is a golden cage designed to make the animals inside feel like royalty. The grand foyer was a sea of black tuxedos and dresses that cost more than the average American mortgage. The air smelled of expensive perfume, stale ambition, and the metallic tang of fear masked by champagne. I stood at the top of the marble staircase, my hand resting lightly on the arm of Marcus Vane. I was not wearing the sensible beige cardigans Julian liked. I was not wearing the modest pearls he said made me look classy. I was wearing a gown made of liquid silver silk that clung to my body like a second skin, cut low in the back and high on the thigh. My hair, the jagged bob I had cut on the plane, was slicked back, sharp enough to cut glass. I wore no jewelry except for a single, massive emerald choker that Marcus had pulled from a vault in Geneva that afternoon. It sat on my throat like a collar of green fire. I looked down at the crowd. I looked like a predator surveying a herd of slow-moving gazelles. "Ready?" Marcus asked quietly. He looked regal in a tuxedo that fit him with military precision. "Showtime," I replied. We descended the stairs. The murmur of the crowd shifted. Heads turned. In this world, Marcus Vane was God, and everyone wanted to know who God had brought to the party. I saw them immediately. They were standing near a pillar of pink marble, trying to look like they belonged. Julian was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too shiny, the lapels a bit too wide. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead from 50 feet away. He was clutching a glass of whiskey like a lifeline. The credit card rejections from yesterday had rattled him. He looked like a man holding his breath. Next to him, Sienna Vane looked like a child playing dress-up. She wore a pink tulle dress that was too big, too loud, and completely wrong for the season. She was scanning the room desperately, looking for validation, for a camera, for anyone to look at her with envy. We walked straight toward them. The crowd parted for Marcus like the Red Sea. Julian saw Marcus first. Relief washed over his face. He straightened his tie, put on his best salesman smile, and stepped forward, dragging Sienna with him. "Marcus!" Julian called out, his voice a little too loud, echoing off the gold leaf ceiling. "Over here. We have been waiting for you." He did not see me. He saw a woman in silver standing next to the billionaire. His brain registered trophy wife, or expensive escort, and dismissed me. He was focused entirely on the money. "Marcus," Julian said, extending his hand, "I am so glad you made it. The buyer is here. Volkov is ready to sign. We just need to finalize the—" He stopped. I stepped out from behind Marcus's shoulder. I looked Julian dead in the eyes. I did not smile. I did not blink. Julian's hand froze in midair. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked. Once, twice, trying to reconcile the image in front of him with the reality he thought he knew. He looked at the silver dress. He looked at the sharp hair. He looked at the cold, dead eyes. "Hope?" he whispered. It was more of a question than a name. "Hello, Julian," I said. My voice was smooth, low, and completely devoid of warmth. "You look tired. Rough flight?" The color drained from his face so fast, he looked like a corpse. "What are you doing here? You are supposed to be—" "In Queens?" I finished for him. "In a motel? Crying?" I took a step closer. "I decided Paris suited me better." Sienna let out a squeal. "Daddy!" She threw herself at Marcus, expecting a hug, expecting the usual indulgence. "Daddy, look, Julian brought me to Paris. Aren't you surprised? We are staying at the Ritz." Marcus did not move. He did not open his arms. He stood like a statue of ice. Sienna bounced off his cold demeanor and stumbled back, confused. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus looked at her with a terrifying lack of interest. "You are making a scene. Sienna, fix your strap. You look disheveled." He turned his back on his own daughter and gestured to a group of men standing nearby, the potential investors, the sharks of the industry. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly over the music, "I would like to introduce you to my associate, the true genius behind Aura Dynamics, the woman who wrote the code that runs your cities, Ms. Hope Lamberton." The men turned to me. They looked at me with respect, with interest. They ignored Julian completely. "Ms. Lamberton," a French banker said, taking my hand, "I have read your white paper on quantum encryption. Brilliant work." "Thank you, Jean-Pierre," I said, recognizing him from his dossier. "I believe your bank uses my protocol for its SWIFT transactions. We should discuss the latency issues you have been having in the Asia sector." Julian stood there, his hand still half extended, ignored by the man whose money he needed, ignored by the wife he had discarded. He looked like a ghost at his own funeral. He grabbed my arm. His grip was hard, desperate. "What the hell is this?" he hissed, leaning in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and fear. "How did you get here? Who paid for that dress? If you think you can ruin this deal, I will." Before he could finish the threat, a hand the size of a shovel clamped onto his wrist. Marcus's head of security, a man named Kane, who moved like a shadow, twisted Julian's arm back. Julian gasped, dropping his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "Mr. Thorne seems to have lost his balance," I said loudly enough for the nearby circle to hear. "Perhaps he has had too much to drink." "Let go of me!" Julian snarled, trying to regain his dignity as Kane released him. He straightened his jacket, his face flushed with humiliation. "You are playing a dangerous game." "Hope," Julian whispered, his eyes darting around to see if Volkov was watching. You do not belong here. You are a gardener. You are a nothing. Go back to the hotel room I booked for you. Oh, wait, I didn't book one. I leaned in. I moved my lips close to his ear, close enough to kiss him, close enough to kill him. You are right, Julian, I whispered. I am the gardener, and I am here to pull the weeds. Then, I said it, the line of code. It was not a complex command. It was a comment line I had written in the very first version of the Aura kernel, 10 years ago, a private joke between two lovers who thought they would conquer the world. / if, love equals true. Execute, future. Else system, self-destruct, Julian. I recited the syntax perfectly, the brackets, the semicolon, the logic. Julian flinched as if I had stabbed him. He stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. He remembered. He remembered the night I wrote that, laughing, drunk on cheap wine and big dreams. He remembered that I told him it was the root command, the heart of the system. You, he stammered. You touched the core? What did you do? I fixed it, I said, pulling back and smiling a smile that did not reach my eyes. Good luck with the demo, darling. I turned and walked away. Slipping my arm back through Marcus's, Julian stood there, hyperventilating. I could see the panic rising in him like a tide. He looked at his watch. He looked at the door. He looked at Volkov, who was standing across the room, watching the scene with the impassive gaze of a reptile. He is rattled, Marcus murmured as we moved through the crowd. He is going to rush. Good, I said. Panic makes people sloppy. Sloppy makes errors. Errors make me rich. There is Volkov, Marcus indicated with a tilt of his head. Oleg Volkov was a short, thick man who looked like a boulder squeezed into a tuxedo. He was surrounded by 3 bodyguards and a team of technical advisors. He was not drinking. He was watching Julian with a frown. I need 2 minutes, I said. I will distract his security, Marcus said. He walked over to the head bodyguard, engaging him in a conversation about firearms. I slipped into the gap. I stood next to Volkov, looking at the same painting he was pretending to admire. It is a fake, I said softly. Volkov did not turn. The painting? The technology, I said. Volkov turned his head slowly. His eyes were pale blue, cold as the Siberian tundra. And who are you to say this? Ms. Lamberton? I know who you are, the wife, the scorned woman. I am the architect, Mr. Volkov, I corrected. And I know what you are buying. You are buying the Aura core expecting a neural network that can adapt to military encryption. You expect it to learn. That is the promise, Volkov said. Julian is selling you the version 2.0. I lied smoothly. It has a fatal flaw in the thermal regulation of the data packets. When the server load exceeds 80%, say during a drone swarm guidance operation, the logic gates overheat. They invert. The system does not just crash, it targets the origin point. Volkov's eyes narrowed. Targets the origin point? It blows up the user, I said simply. We fixed it in version 3.0, but Julian does not have version 3. He only has the backups. I took a sip of champagne. But of course, I am just a scorned wife. Maybe he figured out the patch himself. He is very talented at sales. I walked away before he could ask a question. I left the poison in his ear. I knew Volkov. He was a technical man. He did not care about drama. He cared about specs, and I had just given him a technical nightmare to worry about. I looked back. Volkov was staring at Julian. He pulled his chief engineer close and whispered something aggressively. The engineer nodded nervously and pulled out a tablet. The trap was primed. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the center of the room. The music stopped. Julian stepped into the light. He had regained some of his composure, but his smile was brittle. He held a microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian announced, his voice booming, thank you for joining us tonight. Aura Dynamics has always been about the future, and tonight, we take the next step. I am proud to announce a historic partnership that will redefine global security. He gestured to Volkov. Mr. Oleg Volkov and I will be signing the transfer agreement for the Aura Core technology right here, right now. A table was wheeled out. On it sat a silver laptop and a single, gold-plated flash drive, the physical key. Julian looked at me in the crowd. His eyes were pleading, angry, terrified. He wanted to get this done. He wanted the money in the Swiss account before I could whisper any more codes, before the doubts could take root. He waved Volkov over. Volkov walked to the table. He looked at Julian. He looked at the laptop. He looked at his engineer, who was furiously typing on his tablet, running diagnostics I had suggested. "The money is in escrow," Julian said, his voice tight. "Just press the key, Oleg. The code is yours." Volkov hesitated. "Is there a problem?" Julian asked, his laugh nervous. "Cold feet?" "Just verification," Volkov grunted. He plugged the gold flash drive into the laptop. The screen lit up. The Aura logo spun. I stood in the shadows, watching. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Julian was sweating profusely now. He needed that signature. He needed Volkov to accept the transfer. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Julian said. Pure logic. Volkov tapped a key. The code scrolled. It looked perfect. It looked exactly like the system he wanted. He looked at me one last time. I raised my glass to him, a silent dare. Volkov made a decision. He decided the risk was worth it, or perhaps he thought he could fix the flaw I mentioned. Greed usually overrides caution. "Agreed," Volkov said. He typed his authorization code. Transfer initiated. Julian let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He slumped slightly, relief flooding his body. He had done it. He had sold the company. He had the money. He looked at me with a smirk of triumph. "I won," his eyes said. "You can scare me, but I have the cash." I smiled back. A genuine smile this time. "Oh, Julian, I thought you did not win. You just pulled the pin on the grenade." On the big screen behind the stage, a progress bar appeared. Transferring Aura Core. 10%, 20%. The room applauded. Sienna clapped her hands, jumping up and down. I checked my watch. 3, I whispered. 2, 1, 30%. And then, the poison pill woke up. The progress bar on the giant screen behind Julian was the only thing in the room that mattered. It was a green line moving from left to right. A digital visualization of $500 million moving from a numbered account in Zurich to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. 98%, 99%. The room held its breath. Julian Thorne stood by the laptop, his hand resting on the table to steady himself. He was vibrating with a mixture of greed and terror. He looked at the screen, then at his phone. A chime echoed through the silent ballroom. It was the specific, melodic notification of the Swiss banking app Julian used. He pulled his phone from his pocket. I saw his shoulders drop 3 inches. The tension left his body, replaced by a sag of pure relief. The money was there. He had done it. He had sold my life's work, pocketed $500 million, and survived the night. 100%, Julian announced, his voice regaining that slick, salesman confidence. He turned to Oleg Volkov. "The transfer is complete. The source code is now on your secure drive. Mr. Volkov, it has been a pleasure doing business with you." Volkov nodded, signaling his chief engineer to verify the files on the drive. The engineer typed a command. "Verifying integrity," the engineer muttered. Julian beamed. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning for me. When he found me standing in the shadows near the exit, he smirked. It was a look of pure malice. "I beat you," the look said. "You tried to scare me, but I have the money." He turned back to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just witnessed is the dawn of a new era for Aura Dynamics. We have secured the capital to—" And then, the poison pill swallowed him whole. It did not start with an explosion. It started with a sound. A low, dissonant electronic screech tore through the speakers of the Palais Garnier, like a violin string being pulled until it snapped. People covered their ears. On the massive LED screen behind Julian, the green progress bar froze. Then, it began to fracture. The pixels turned from a soothing green to a violent, strobing red. "What is that?" Volkov barked, stepping forward. "Just a display glitch," Julian stammered, tapping the laptop. "The projector must be overheating. Ignore it. The code is safe." "Sir," the Russian engineer said, his voice trembling. "The drive, it is eating itself." "What?" Julian spun around. On the main screen, the Aura Dynamics logo, the swirling blue vortex that I had designed on a napkin 10 years ago, began to unravel. The code that made up the image was deconstructing, stripping itself down to raw binary, and then vanishing into blackness. Then, the text appeared. It was not a system error. It was not a Windows crash report. It was a message typed in a stark, white, serif font, 50 feet high, impossible to miss. Intellectual property of Hope. Lamberton. A gasp rippled through the crowd. I stood perfectly still, my hands clasped in front of my silver dress, watching the execution. Unauthorized access denied. Initiating system purge. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed, slamming his hands onto the keyboard. "Cut the feed. Cut the power." But the laptop was not responding. I had locked the input peripherals. The keyboard was dead. The trackpad was dead. The only thing alive was the script I had planted. Running with ruthless efficiency, deleting source code 10%. "No!" Julian yelled. He tried to yank the flash drive out of the USB port. "Do not touch it," the Russian engineer shouted, grabbing Julian's wrist. "If you pull it during a write purge cycle, you will corrupt the hardware sectors. You will destroy the drive permanently." "It is deleting my money," Julian shrieked, wrestling with the man. "Stop it! Fix it!" Deleting source code. 40%. Volkov stepped into the chaos. He moved with a terrifying speed for a man of his size. He grabbed Julian by the lapels of his tuxedo and slammed him against the table. The laptop bounced, the screen flickering. "What is this?" Volkov asked. His voice was not loud. It was a low rumble, like a tank engine idling. "I just transferred $500 million, and now your machine tells me the product belongs to your wife, and that it is deleting itself?" "It is a hack!" Julian cried, sweat pouring down his face, melting his stage makeup. "She hacked us. She is sabotage. It is industrial terrorism." Volkov stared at him. "Sabotage?" "Yes, look at her." Julian pointed a shaking finger at me across the room. The spotlight swung wildly, finding me in the darkness. "She did this. She is jealous. She wants to ruin me." I did not flinch under the spotlight. I did not look like a terrorist. I looked like a statue of justice carved in ice. Volkov looked at me, then looked back at Julian. His grip on Julian's jacket tightened until the fabric began to tear. "Let me understand this," Volkov said, his Russian accent thickening with rage. "For 3 weeks, during our negotiations, you told me your wife was a nobody. You told me she was a country burden. You told me she could barely operate a microwave, let alone a neural network." "She is," Julian insisted, his eyes wide with panic. "She is useless." "So?" Volkov continued, leaning in until his nose was an inch from Julian's. "You are telling me that a useless woman, a woman with no technical skills, managed to breach a military-grade air-gapped encryption key, bypass my own security team, and remote wipe a drive in the middle of a live transfer?" The logic trap snapped shut. Julian opened his mouth, but no words came out. If he admitted I was capable of the hack, he admitted that he had lied about my role in the company, proving that he was selling stolen goods. If he insisted I was incompetent, then he had to explain how the system was failing on its own, which meant he was selling a defective product. He was damned if he did, and damned if he did not. Deleting source code. 80%. Julian stammered. It is not her. It is a virus. A Russian virus. Maybe it came from your side. It was the worst thing he could have said. Volkov released him with a shove that sent Julian sprawling onto the floor. You accuse me? You take my money, and you give me nothing, and then you insult my competence? Volkov signaled his bodyguards. The three men stepped forward, their jackets unbuttoning. The crowd in the ballroom began to scream and scramble for the exits. This was no longer a corporate gala. It was a crime scene in the making. Sienna Vane was standing by the speaker stack. She had stopped jumping. She had stopped smiling. She was clutching her phone, but she was not recording. She was staring at Julian, who was crawling on the floor, trying to gather the cables of the dying laptop. She looked at the man she had called a king on Instagram. He was on his knees, weeping, begging a Russian mobster for mercy. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. Then she looked at Volkov. The Russian was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at Julian's neck, Sienna realized, perhaps for the first time in her sheltered life, that actions had consequences that Daddy's credit card could not fix. She took a step back, her heels clicking on the floor. Julian? She whimpered. Shut up! Julian screamed at her, not looking up. Call your father. Tell him to fix this. Tell him to buy the code back. Sienna looked up at the balcony. I followed her gaze. High above the chaos, leaning against the velvet railing of the VIP box, stood Marcus Vane. He was holding a glass of champagne. He was not looking at his daughter. He was not looking at the frantic investors or the fleeing guests. He was looking at me. He raised his glass in a subtle salute. His expression was one of profound, professional satisfaction. He was watching a controlled demolition, and he admired the engineer. Deleting source code 100%, purge complete, goodbye. The screen on the stage went black. The laptop whirred once. A high-pitched sound of a hard drive head crashing into the platter, and then died. Silence fell over the room. The money was gone from Julian's control, locked in the escrow account that Volkov would soon freeze. The product was gone, wiped from existence on the transfer drive. And the backup? I had melted the server in New York. Julian Thorne had nothing. He sat on the floor, staring at the black screen. It is gone, he whispered. It is all gone. Volkov stepped over him. He did not hit him. Violence here, in front of witnesses, was unprofessional. You have 24 hours to return my funds, Volkov said, his voice cold enough to freeze nitrogen. If the money is not in my account by tomorrow morning, I will not send lawyers. I will send cleaners. Volkov turned and marched out of the hall, his entourage sweeping through the crowd like a phalanx. Julian was left alone in the center of the spotlight. I walked slowly towards the stage. The crowd parted for me again, but this time it was not out of curiosity, it was out of fear. They realized that the woman in the silver dress was the one holding the detonator. I stopped at the edge of the stage. I looked down at my husband. You should have read the user manual. Julian, I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears and shock. Why? He rasped. Why burn it all down? You destroyed the company. You destroyed your own legacy. Just to hurt me? You mistake the situation, I replied. I did not destroy the legacy. I just took it off the market. I turned to leave. Hope, he screamed after me. You can't leave me here. He will kill me. You have to help me. I paused. I looked over my shoulder, offering him the same cold, blank profile he had given me for the last 6 months. I am sorry, I said. I am just a gardener. I do not know how to fix technical problems. I walked out of the ballroom, the sound of my heels echoing like gunshots on the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Sienna sobbing, and the sound of Julian trying to dial a phone that no one would ever answer again. The monitors in the library of the townhouse in the 16th arrondissement were high-definition 4K screens, but they could not capture the smell of fear. I could imagine it, though. I imagined the imperial suite at the Ritz smelled of stale sweat, spilled alcohol, and the ozone scent of a career burning to the ground. Marcus Vane and I sat in the darkness, illuminated only by the glow of the surveillance feed. We were silent spectators to the final act of a tragedy I had written. On the screen, Julian was a blur of motion. He had torn off his bow tie. His tuxedo shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing skin flushed red with panic. He was pacing the length of the Persian rug, clutching his phone like it was a holy relic that had lost its power. He was calling his lawyers, or trying to. "Pick up!" Julian screamed at the empty room. "Pick up, you parasites! I pay you $10,000 a month! Pick up!" He threw the phone onto the sofa and grabbed the hotel landline. He dialed a number I recognized, the direct line to the Sterling, Cooper, and Vance emergency legal team in New York. I watched him listen to the silence. Then he slammed the receiver down. "They dropped him," I said quietly to Marcus. "I sent the evidence of the attempted illegal technology transfer to the senior partners an hour ago. They are not just ignoring him, they are shredding his file." Julian ran his hands through his hair, gripping the roots until his knuckles turned white. He turned to the desk where his laptop lay dead, the hard drive fried by my code. He tried to turn it on again, jamming his finger against the power button over and over, a futile, rhythmic clicking sound that echoed through the suite. Sienna Vane was sitting on the edge of the bathtub in the bathroom, visible through the open door. She had stopped crying. Now, she was just staring at the wall, her mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. The pink tulle dress was crumpled. She looked like a discarded doll. Julian stormed into the bathroom. He loomed over her, his shadow swallowing her small frame. "Get up," he barked. Sienna flinched. "What?" "I said get up," Julian roared, grabbing her arm and hauling her to her feet. He dragged her into the main room. "Your father. Call him." "I can't," Sienna stammered, trying to pull her arm away. "He walked away. Julian, you saw him. He left us there." "He left me," Julian hissed, his face inches from hers. "He didn't leave you. You are his blood. You are his precious little princess. He won't let you rot in a French prison." He shoved her toward the phone on the sofa. "Call him. Tell him I need a bridge loan. Tell him Volkov is going to kill me if I do not have the money by morning. Tell him I will sign over the company. I will sign over everything. Just get me the cash." Sienna's hands were shaking so badly she dropped the phone twice. Julian stood over her, breathing hard, looking like a cornered animal ready to bite. "Do it!" he screamed. Sienna dialed. In the library. Marcus's phone lit up on the mahogany desk between us. The screen flashed. Sienna, mobile. Marcus looked at the phone. He did not reach for it immediately. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, savoring the peat and the smoke. "Answer it," I said. "Let them hear the verdict." Marcus pressed the speakerphone button. "Daddy?" Sienna's voice filled the library, shrill and terrified. "Daddy, please pick up. Please." "I am here, Sienna," Marcus said. His voice was calm, devoid of any fatherly warmth. It was the voice of a judge. "Oh, thank God," Sienna sobbed. "Daddy, it is a nightmare. Julian everything went wrong. The Russians are angry. We need help. We need to leave Paris tonight. Can you send the jet? Can you send money?" Julian snatched the phone from Sienna's hand. "Marcus," Julian panted, trying to sound authoritative but failing miserably. "Listen to me. We have a situation. There was a glitch. A sabotage. Hope she did something to the drive. Volkov thinks I scammed him. I need $500 million to cover the escrow until I can fix the code. It is just a loan. Marcus, a short-term liquidity injection. I will pay you back with interest. 10%. No, 20%. Marcus looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "There is no code to fix, Julian," Marcus said. "The code is gone. Hope deleted it. And as for the money, I am afraid the Vane Group does not invest in distressed assets." "Distressed?" Julian laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound. I am not distressed. I am the CEO of Aura Dynamics. You are the former CEO of a shell company that is currently under investigation by the SEC, the FBI, and the French Ministry of Finance, Marcus corrected. As of 10 minutes ago, I have formally withdrawn all Vane capital from Aura. The company is insolvent. You can't do that, Julian screamed. We had a deal. We are family. I am going to marry your daughter. You are not going to marry anyone, Marcus said. You are going to prison. Julian went silent. The reality of the words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. And Sienna? Marcus continued, addressing the silence. I am here, Daddy, Sienna whispered. I checked your credit card statements. Sienna, Marcus said, you spent 40,000 euros on handbags in 3 days. You spent 12,000 euros on champagne. You live like a queen on a kingdom you did not build. I can explain, Sienna cried. There is nothing to explain, Marcus said. I have canceled your cards, all of them, the Black Amex, the Visa Infinite, even the emergency debit card. They are all dead. What? Sienna gasped. But how will I get home? How will I eat? You are 23 years old, Marcus said coldly. You have 2 legs and 2 hands. If you want a ticket back to New York, I suggest you find a job. I hear the Ritz is hiring maids. Or perhaps you can sell those handbags you love so much. Daddy, no, Sienna wailed. You can't leave me here with him. He is crazy. You chose him, Marcus said. You wanted to play grown-up. Now you are one. Good luck. Marcus hung up. The line went dead. In the hotel room, the silence stretched for 5 seconds. Julian stared at the phone in his hand. Then he looked at Sienna. The mask fell off completely. For 10 years, I had seen Julian as a charmer, a narcissist, a manipulator, but I had never seen him as a monster. Not until now. He threw the phone at Sienna. It missed her head by an inch and shattered against the wall. You useless little parasite, Julian spat. He cut you off. He actually cut you off. I didn't know, Sienna sobbed, backing away until she hit the window. I didn't know he would do that. You were my insurance policy. Julian advanced on her. The only reason I brought you here, the only reason I let you hang off my arm like a cheap ornament, was because your father was the bank. If you don't have his money, what are you? You are nothing. You are a headache with legs. Julian, please, Sienna begged, holding up her hands. I should have stuck with Hope, Julian muttered, pacing in a tight circle. She was boring, but she was useful. She made me money. You? You just cost me money. He stopped and looked at her with pure disgust. Get out. Get out of my sight before I kill you. I have nowhere to go, Sienna cried. I don't care, Julian screamed. He raised his hand, his palm open, ready to strike. Sienna flinched, closing her eyes, waiting for the blow. It never came. Bam! 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 The heavy oak door of the suite shuddered under the force of a fist. Police! Ouvrez la porte! Julian froze. His hand hovered in the air. The blood drained from his face. Police! The voice shouted again. Then came the sound of a magnetic key card engaging the lock. The door swung open. 6 officers from the Brigade Financière marched into the room. They wore plain clothes, but they moved with the unmistakable authority of the law. They were followed by 2 uniformed officers carrying tactical gear. Julian Thorne? The lead detective asked. He was a man with a tired face and a trench coat that looked slept in. Julian lowered his hand. He looked at the window, as if considering jumping. We were on the 4th floor. It was not high enough to die, just high enough to break every bone in his body. I am Julian Thorne, he whispered. I am Detective Laurent, the man said, flashing a badge. We have received a formal complaint regarding international securities fraud, falsification of corporate documents, and the attempted sale of restricted dual-use technology without an export license. That is a lie, Julian said automatically, his voice trembling. I am an American citizen. You have no jurisdiction. You are on French soil, trying to sell American secrets to a Russian national, Laurent said calmly. We have all the jurisdiction we need. Please hand over your passport. My passport? Julian clutched his chest. Why? You are a flight risk. Monsieur Thorne, your assets have been frozen globally. Your hotel bill is unpaid, and we have witness testimony that you intend to flee to a non-extradition country. Who? Julian demanded. Who told you that? Laurent did not answer. He simply held out his hand. The passport. Now. Julian walked to the safe in the closet. He opened it with shaking fingers. He took out the blue booklet. He looked at it for a long moment. His ticket to freedom. His proof of status. Then he handed it to the detective. You are confined to this hotel until the preliminary hearing on Monday, Laurent stated, pocketing the passport. Do not attempt to leave the building. We have officers stationed in the lobby and at the service exits. If you step 1 foot onto the Place Vendôme, you will be arrested and transferred to La Santé prison. And trust me, Monsieur, the Ritz is much more comfortable. The detectives turned to Sienna. She was cowering in the corner. Mademoiselle Vane? Laurent asked. Yes, she squeaked. You are free to go, Laurent said. But we advise you to leave the premises. The room is no longer paid for, and the hotel management has indicated they will be evicting Monsieur Thorne as soon as his legal status allows. The police marched out, leaving the door slightly ajar. Julian stood in the center of the room. He was a prisoner in a gilded cage. He had no money. He had no passport. He had no friends. He sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. Sienna grabbed her purse. She did not look at him. She ran for the door, her heels clacking on the floor, fleeing the sinking ship as fast as she could. Julian was alone. I leaned forward in the library. Now, I said. Send it. I typed a command on my keyboard. In the hotel suite, Julian's phone pinged. He ignored it. It pinged again, and again. A persistent, demanding sound. Slowly, heavily. Julian reached out and picked up the phone. He looked at the screen. New message from the gardener. He stared at the name. His thumb hovered over the notification. He opened it. It was a video file. I watched on the surveillance feed as he pressed play. The video on his phone screen was grainy but clear. It was black and white footage from a hidden camera. A camera I had installed inside the eyes of the teddy bear that sat on the shelf in his home office. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. The video showed Julian sitting at his desk. He was holding a digital stylus. On the desk was a tablet displaying a document. Transfer of Intellectual Property Rights, Aura Core. The video showed him practicing a signature on a scratch pad. He was tracing lines, over and over. Then, the video zoomed in. He pulled up a reference image on his computer screen. It was my signature from our marriage certificate. He placed the stylus on the tablet and carefully, methodically, forged my name on the authorization line. He smiled as he did it. He looked at the teddy bear, at the camera, and winked, as if sharing a joke with an invisible audience. Too easy, the Julian in the video muttered, in the hotel room. The real Julian dropped the phone. He stared at the device as it lay on the Persian rug. The video looped. He signed. He winked. He muttered. It was irrefutable proof. It was not just fraud. It was identity theft. It was premeditated, and he had done it in front of a camera he didn't know existed. His phone buzzed one last time. A text message appeared below the video. I spoke the words as he read them. I told you, Julian, I built the house. I see everything. Julian let out a sound that was half scream, half laugh. It was the sound of a mind snapping. He grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray from the table and hurled it at the mirror. The glass exploded. Shards showered down onto the floor, reflecting 1,000 fractured images of a man who had thought he was a king, but was just a thief caught in his own trap. I turned off the monitor. The screen faded to black. He is done, Marcus said, closing the folder on his desk. Not yet, I said, standing up and smoothing the silk of my dress. He is trapped. He is broke. He is exposed. But he still has hope that he can talk his way out of it. He thinks he can charm a jury. I walked to the door of the library. Monday morning, I said. I am going to visit him. I want to look him in the eye when he realizes that I own his debt. You are a cruel woman. Hope, Marcus said. There was no judgment in his voice, only observation. I am a realist, Marcus, I replied. Cruelty is hurting someone for no reason. This is just balancing the books. Monday morning in Paris arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The rain had stopped, but the city felt damp and heavy, as if it were hung over from the excess of the weekend. I stood in the lobby of the Ritz. The concierge, Henri, who had been so polite on the phone when I called to humiliate my husband, now looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. He knew who I was. He knew I was the reason the police were stationed on the 4th floor. Madame Thorne, he murmured, bowing slightly. Do you require an escort? No. Henri, I said, adjusting the lapel of my charcoal blazer. I know the way, before I could move toward the elevators. A figure detached itself from the shadows of a large potted fern near the entrance. It was a girl wearing a tracksuit that looked like it had been slept in. Her hair, usually a glossy curtain of blonde extensions, was pulled back in a messy knot. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing skin that looked pale and blotchy. Sienna Vane. She saw me and froze. For a second, I thought she would run, but she didn't. She walked toward me, her expensive sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. She looked like a ghost of the girl who had been drinking champagne at 30,000 feet just 2 days ago. Hope, she said. Her voice was small, cracked from crying. I stopped. I did not smile. I did not offer a hand. Sienna. She flinched at the sound of her name. I wanted to say I am sorry. I didn't know. I knew he was married, but he told me it was over. He told me you were just roommates. He told me you didn't understand him, and you believed him because you wanted to believe him, I said calmly. Because the lie came wrapped in a private jet and a diamond ring, tears welled up in her eyes. I lost everything. My dad won't take my calls. My cards are declined. The hotel kicked me out this morning. I slept in the lobby on a chair. She looked at me with pleading eyes. Can you ask my dad to talk to me? Please? He listens to you. I looked at this girl. She was 23 years old. At 23, I was working 2 jobs and coding until 4 a.m. to pay for my server space. I had built a career from scrap metal and logic. She had built a life on being someone's daughter and someone's mistress. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not hate. I realized with a jolt that I could not hate her because she was not significant enough to hate. She was just collateral damage, a prop Julian had used to make himself feel tall. I am not going to call your father, I said. Marcus is teaching you a lesson. If I interfere, I devalue the education. Sienna sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I just want to go home. I hate Paris. I hate him. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a white envelope. Here, I said, holding it out. Sienna looked up, sniffing. She took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a boarding pass. It is a flight to New York, I explained. It leaves in 3 hours from Charles de Gaulle. She stared at the ticket. Economy? She whispered, reading the class. Seat 42E? That is a middle seat. It is a seat, I corrected. It will get you to JFK. From there, you are on your own. You can take the subway. Thank you, she said, clutching the ticket like it was a winning lottery number. Thank you. Hope, I promise, I will pay you back. When I get a job, or when Daddy forgives me. Do not pay me back, I said. Just remember this feeling. Remember what it feels like to be stranded because you relied on a man to carry your wallet. I leaned in closer. That ticket cost $600. The lesson you just learned? That is worth more than any Hermes bag you ever bought. Do not waste it. She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. She looked at me one last time, a mixture of shame and gratitude, and then she turned and ran toward the revolving doors, heading for the taxi stand. I watched her go. I felt lighter. One loose end tied. Now for the knot. I took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, guarded by a single French police officer who was leaning against the wall, scrolling on his phone. He looked up as I approached. "Madame Thorne," he said, straightening up. "Detective Laurent said you might come?" "Is he in there?" I asked. "He has not moved," the officer said. "He ordered breakfast, but the hotel refused to send it up because the credit card on file is invalid. He has been shouting at the walls for an hour." The officer swiped a keycard and opened the door. The smell hit me first. It was the scent of stale alcohol, old sweat, an expensive cologne that had turned sour. The curtains were drawn, plunging the room into a gloom that felt suffocating. Julian was sitting on the floor in the center of the room. He was still wearing his tuxedo trousers, but the shirt was unbuttoned, stained with wine. He was unshaven. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, surrounded by dark circles that looked like bruises. He looked up when the light from the hallway cut across the carpet. He squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes. "Room service?" he croaked. "Did you bring coffee? I told you I would pay you when the wire clears." I stepped inside and let the door click shut behind me. "The wire is not going to clear. Julian." He froze. He lowered his hand slowly. When he saw me, a spasm went through his face. It was a kaleidoscope of emotions: fear, anger, shame, and then, finally, a desperate, calculating hope. He scrambled to his feet. He swayed slightly, catching his balance on the edge of the sofa. "Hope," he breathed. He ran a hand through his messy hair, trying to smooth it down. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Baby, you came." "I came," I said, standing near the door. I did not move further into the room. I wanted the distance. "I knew you would," he said, his voice gaining a little strength. He took a step toward me. "I knew you wouldn't leave me here to rot. We have history, right? 10 years. You can't just erase 10 years. "I didn't erase them," I said. "You did, when you signed my name on a transfer document." He flinched. "That was a misunderstanding. I was under pressure. Volkov is a dangerous man." "Hope, you don't understand. I did it to protect us, to get the money so we could retire. I was going to surprise you." "Surprise me?" I repeated. "By divorcing me, framing me for embezzlement, and running away with a 23-year-old? He waved his hand dismissively. "Sienna, she means nothing. She was just a strategy. Marcus Vane is a shark. I needed to get close to him to secure the funding. She was the access point. It was business. Hope. It was all for the company. For us." He was close to me now. He reached out to take my hand. I did not pull away. I let him touch me. His hand was clammy and cold. "I can fix this," he said, his eyes wide and manic. "Listen to me. We can fix this. I still have connections. The code is okay. The code is gone. But we have the reputation. We have the brand. If we go back to New York together, if we walk into that boardroom hand in hand, we can spin this. We can say it was a Russian cyber attack. We can say we defeated it. We will be heroes." He squeezed my hand. "And I will make it up to you. I swear. We will split everything. 50-50. No, 60-40. You take 60% of the shares. You can be the CEO. I will step down. I will be the advisor. Whatever you want. Just get me out of here. Get Marcus to call off the dogs." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had once thought was the sun in my solar system. I remembered the nights I had stayed up rewriting his speeches so he would sound smart. I remembered how I had blended my own credit with his to get our first loan. I remembered loving him so much it physically hurt. And now? I felt nothing. It was not the hot rage of betrayal. It was not the cold ache of loss. It was the feeling you get when you look at an old phone you used to use. Familiar. Scratched. But completely obsolete. He was just a piece of hardware that no longer supported my operating system. I pulled my hand away. I wiped it on the side of my blazer. "You are not listening, Julian," I said softly. "You are still running the old simulation. You think this is a negotiation. You think you have assets to trade." "I have the company," he insisted. "I have the house in the Hamptons. I have the penthouse." "The house in the Hamptons is leveraged to 90%, I said. "And the penthouse? The bank foreclosed on the mortgage this morning because the automatic payments bounced. As for the company..." I walked over to the desk. I picked up a piece of hotel stationery and a pen. I wrote a single number on it, $180 million. I held it up. "Do you recognize this number?" Julian stared at it. "That is the debt load, the venture capital loans, the operating lines of credit." "Correct," I said. $180 million in toxic debt, high interest, short term. You took it out to fund your lifestyle, to pay for the private jets and the parties, hiding it in off-balance sheet vehicles." "So what?" he snapped. "Companies have debt. We can restructure." "Usually, yes," I agreed. But yesterday, when Marcus Vane publicly announced he was pulling out, the value of that debt crashed. It was trading at 5 cents on the dollar. Junk status. I crumpled the paper and dropped it on the floor. "So I bought it," Julian blinked. "You what?" "I used my payout," I said. "The money I made from my independent patents that you never knew about because you never asked what I did in my spare time. I worked with Marcus's hedge fund. We swept the market this morning. We bought every single note, every single loan, every single IOU with your signature on it." I took a step closer to him. He was backing away now, hitting the back of his knees against the sofa and sitting down heavily. "I am not your wife anymore, Julian," I said. "I am not your partner, and I'm certainly not your victim." I leaned down until our faces were level. "I am your creditor. I am the sole holder of your debt. I own the company. I own the furniture in your office. I own the suit you are wearing. I own the lease on this hotel room." Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. "You can't. That is illegal. That is conflict of interest." "It is perfectly legal," I said. "It is called a hostile takeover, and it is very, very effective." He looked at me with horror. The reality was finally sinking in. The charm was gone. The bargaining was gone. All that was left was the naked truth of his failure. "Why?" he whispered. Tears began to leak from his eyes. Real tears this time. Tears of self-pity. "Why go this far? You could have just divorced me. You could have just left." "I could have," I said. "But you tried to erase me. You tried to sell my mind. You tried to put me in prison for your crimes. You broke the social contract. Julian, you thought because I was quiet, I was weak. You thought because I was kind, I was stupid." I stood up and walked to the window. I pulled back the heavy curtains. The gray light of Paris flooded the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stale air. "I did not do this for revenge," I said, looking out at the Place Vendôme. "I did this for clarity. I wanted you to see exactly who I am. I am an architect. And you were just a tenant who forgot to pay rent." Julian put his head in his hands and began to sob. It was a jagged, ugly sound. "I have nothing," he wept. "I have absolutely nothing." "You have your freedom, eventually," I said. "After the trial, after the prison sentence for fraud, you will get out. You will be 45. You will have a criminal record and no money. And then, you can try to build something real, on your own." I turned back to him. "Consider it a reboot." I walked to the door. "Hope," he called out, his voice cracking. "Hope, please, don't leave me alone." I paused with my hand on the handle. I looked back at him one last time. He looked small. He looked like the day I met him, desperate and trying to sell a lie. Only this time, no one was buying. "Goodbye. Julian," I said. I opened the door. The police officer was still standing there. "He is all yours," I said to the officer. He is ready to cooperate. Merci, madame, the officer said. I walked down the hallway. I did not look back. My heels clicked on the carpet. A steady, rhythmic beat. Click, click, click. It sounded like code compiling. It sounded like a system coming back online after a long, dark purge. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The air outside was cool and wet on my face as I stepped out of the hotel. Marcus Vane's black car was waiting at the curb. The back door opened. I slid inside. Marcus was there, reading the Financial Times on a tablet. He looked up. Done? He asked. The debt is secured, I said. The assets are frozen. He knows. And how did it feel? Marcus asked, watching me closely. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes for a moment. I took a deep breath. It felt, I said, opening my eyes and looking at the gray sky of Paris, like balancing an equation. Good, Marcus said, because we have a board meeting in New York in 8 hours, and as the new majority shareholder, you cannot be late. Driver, I said, to the airport. The car pulled away from the Ritz, merging into the traffic of Paris. I left my husband, my past, and my old self behind in that hotel room. The woman in the car was not Hope Lamberton, the invisible wife. She was Hope Lamberton, the owner, and business was just beginning. The boardroom of Aura Dynamics in New York City was usually a place of hushed tones and aggressive handshakes. Today, it sounded like a trading floor during a crash. I watched the chaos from 4,000 miles away. I was sitting in the library of the townhouse in Paris, positioned next to Marcus Vane. We were broadcasting live onto the 80-inch monitor at the head of the table in New York, on the screen. I could see the faces of the 12 board members. They were pale, sweating, and shouting over each other. The stock had plummeted 60% in pre-market trading. The news of the failed transaction in Paris and the rumors of a federal investigation had turned Aura Dynamics from a tech unicorn into a toxic asset overnight. "Order!" shouted Sterling, Julian's lead defense attorney, who was trying to command the room in his client's absence. "We must have order. These are just allegations. Mr. Thorne is currently en route back to the United States to clear his name." "Mr. Thorne is a fugitive," screamed one of the venture capitalists, a man who had lost $40 million since breakfast. "He tried to sell the core technology to the Russians. We need to distance ourselves immediately. We need to liquidate." "You cannot liquidate," I said. My voice was not loud, but the audio system in the boardroom was calibrated perfectly. My words cut through the noise like a scalpel. The room went silent. 12 heads turned toward the screen. They saw Marcus Vane, the titan of Wall Street. And next to him, they saw me. Not Hope the housewife, not Hope the invisible partner. They saw Hope the majority shareholder. "Ms. Lamberton," Sterling said, his voice dripping with condescension. "With all due respect, this is a closed meeting for equity partners. Your marital disputes are not board business." "It is not Ms. Lamberton," Marcus Vane said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the speakers. "And she is not here to discuss her marriage. She is here to discuss her property." Marcus leaned into the camera. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, Vane Capital has acquired 100% of the outstanding debt obligations of Aura Dynamics. We have also executed a block purchase of the Class B voting shares that were dumped on the market this morning." He paused to let the math sink in. "In simple terms, gentlemen, we own the mortgage, the furniture, and the ground you are standing on." Sterling adjusted his tie, looking nervous. "Even if you hold the debt, the intellectual property, the Aura Core, belongs to the corporation. It is a corporate asset. You cannot claim it." "That is where you are mistaken," I said. I looked directly into the camera lens, making eye contact with every single person in that room across the ocean. "The Aura Core is based on a proprietary neural architecture I wrote 10 years ago," I explained. "I retained the copyright in my own name, licensing it to Aura Dynamics on a renewable annual basis. That license expired yesterday." I took a sip of water. And given the breach of contract by your CEO, who attempted to transfer said license to a foreign entity without my consent, I have formally revoked all usage rights. If you try to run the servers today, you will find they are empty. The company owns nothing but a brand name and a very expensive lease. The silence in New York was absolute. I had just told them that the car they were driving had no engine. "This is blackmail," Sterling sputtered. "You are holding the company hostage." "I am performing a rescue operation," Marcus corrected him. "We are willing to recapitalize the company. We are willing to restore the license. We are willing to bring the stock back to life." "On what terms?" the venture capitalist asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Marcus smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had cornered the sheep and was now deciding which one to eat first. "Complete restructuring," Marcus said. "The board is dissolved effective immediately, the executive team is fired, and a new CEO is appointed." "Who?" Sterling demanded. "You, Mr. Vane? You cannot run a tech company." Marcus stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked commanding, invincible, and utterly terrifying. "No," Marcus said. "Not me." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. "You are all wondering why I am sitting here," Marcus said, his voice taking on a formal, resonant tone. "You are wondering why Marcus Vane, a man who has never lost $1 in his life, is backing the ex-wife of a disgraced fraudster. You are wondering about my daughter, Sienna." He looked at the camera with a look of profound disappointment. "Sienna Vane is my biological child," Marcus said. "She has my eyes, she has my last name, but biology is an accident of birth. It is not a qualification." He turned and looked at me. His expression softened. Just a fraction. It was the look of a craftsman recognizing a masterpiece. "Legacy is not about blood," Marcus declared. "It is about spirit. It is about intellect. It is about the ruthless capacity to survive. I have spent 30 years looking for an heir worthy of my empire. I thought I would never find one." He looked back at the board members. "Sienna has my blood, but Hope Lamberton is the one who inherited my fire. She is the one who built this kingdom while her husband played dress-up. She is the one who brought $1 billion company to its knees in 48 hours just to prove a point." Marcus Vane delivered the final blow, the words ringing out like a judgment from on high. "From this day forward, Hope is my full proxy. She speaks with my voice. She signs with my pen. If you want to talk to me, you go through her. Because while Sienna may be my child, Hope Lamberton is my true daughter." The feed cut. We sat in the silence of the library. I looked at Marcus. He did not look at me. He simply picked up his tablet and began checking stock futures. "Did you mean it?" I asked quietly. "I never say anything I do not mean in business." "Hope," he replied. "Now, pack your bags. We have a plane to catch. Your office is waiting." 7 hours later, a Gulfstream G650 touched down at JFK International Airport, but we were not the only ones landing. On the private tarmac adjacent to ours, a chartered flight from Paris had just taxied to a halt. It was the plane Julian had managed to board using a temporary emergency passport issued by the embassy before the full warrant dropped. He thought he had beaten the clock. He thought he could land in New York, shred the documents, and disappear. I stood at the window of the terminal VIP lounge, watching. The stairs of Julian's plane lowered. Julian Thorne stepped out. He was wearing a fresh suit, trying to look like the master of the universe. He adjusted his sunglasses, looking around for his limo. Instead, he saw 6 black SUVs with flashing red and blue lights. He saw 12 agents in windbreakers with the letters FBI printed in bold yellow on the back. He saw the handcuffs before he saw the officers. I watched as he froze on the bottom step. I saw the moment his shoulders slumped. I saw the moment the arrogance finally died. He didn't run. There was nowhere to run. The agents swarmed him. They spun him around, pushing him against the side of the plane. They patted him down. They pulled his arms behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut. It was a sound I could not hear through the thick glass of the terminal. But I felt it. It was the closing bracket of the code. The loop was terminated. As they led him toward the SUV, Julian looked up. He looked toward the terminal. He could not see me. I was behind tinted glass. But he knew. He looked right at the window where I stood. I did not wave. I did not smile. I simply took a sip of my sparkling water and turned away. He was no longer my problem. He was a case number. 2 weeks later, the corner office on the 45th floor of the Aura Dynamics Tower offered a 360-degree view of Manhattan. From here, the cars looked like toys and the people looked like ants. I sat in the chair that Julian had specially imported from Italy. It was comfortable. It fit me better than it had ever fit him. The office had been purged. The photos of Julian with celebrities were gone. The golf trophies were gone. The humidor was gone. In their place were sleek, modern servers humming quietly in glass cases along the wall. The physical manifestation of the Aura core. Back where it belonged. My secretary buzzed in. "Ms. Thorne?" she said. "The branding team is here with the mock-ups for the new logo." "Send them in 5 minutes," I said. I looked down at the nameplate on my desk. It was heavy, made of solid obsidian with gold lettering. Hope Thorne, Chief Executive Officer. Everyone had told me to change my name. My lawyer said I should go back to Lamberton. They said Thorne was tainted. They said it reminded people of the scandal. But I refused. I kept the name Thorne. I kept it not because I missed him, but because I had bought it. I had paid for this name with 10 years of my life. I had paid for it with my tears, my sweat, and my genius. It was not his name anymore. It was my war trophy. When people heard the name Thorne now, they didn't think of the charming fraudster who went to prison. They thought of the woman who put him there. I conquered the name. I colonized it. It was mine. My private cell phone rang. I picked it up. The caller ID simply said, "The chairman." "Hello?" I answered, swiveling my chair to look out at the Empire State Building. "Hope," Marcus Vane's voice came through, crisp and clear. "I am looking at the quarterly projections. You cut the marketing budget by 40%. We do not need marketing." "Marcus," I said, "the product works. The scandal gave us more free press than a Super Bowl ad. Efficiency is the new brand." Marcus chuckled. It was a rare, dry sound. "Ruthless. I like it. Listen, I am in town for the evening. I have a table at Le Bernardin at 8. We need to discuss the acquisition of that semiconductor firm in Taiwan." "I have read the dossier," I said. "They are overvalued. We should wait for their Q3 earnings to miss, then buy them at a discount." "We can argue about it over dinner," Marcus said. "Do not be late. I hate waiting." "I am never late," I replied. "I am just precise." "Good," Marcus said. "I will see you there, daughter." The word hung in the air for a second. It wasn't sentimental. It was an acknowledgement of rank. It was a title bestowed by a king to a general. I smiled, a real smile, one that felt like the future. "Okay, Dad," I said. "I am coming." I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting over New York, painting the city in shades of gold and steel. I saw my reflection in the glass. The hair was still short and sharp. The suit was armor. The eyes were clear. The gardener was gone. The architect had built a fortress. And now, she was running the world. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, revenge, and the ultimate power move. I hope you enjoyed watching Hope Lamberton take back her life and build her empire. Please comment down below and tell me, where are you listening to this story from? Are you in the car, at work, or relaxing at home? I would love to know where our community is tuning in from. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, stay sharp.